Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. I wish you a pleasant listening experience. Today, I'm going to decode a highly challenging book titled The Book of Why, The New Science of Cause and Effect. How difficult is it? Based on my year-long exploration, this is arguably the toughest book I've encountered. Normally, we summarize the core content of a book with a sentence or a question. However, today, I might need to elaborate a bit more because the book is incredibly rich in content. What does this book mainly discuss? In the author's own words, I just pushed open a new science called causal science. Note, he didn't mention a new subject or research but an entirely new science. The author of this book is a legendary figure in the field of artificial intelligence, the renowned computer scientist Judea Pearl. At the age of 83, he was once hailed by The Atlantic as the founding father of machine learning technology. In 2011, he received the Turing Award for developing causal reasoning algorithms. Additionally, he's a member of the National Academy of Sciences and one of the initial 10 inductees into the IEEE Intelligent Systems Hall of Fame. However, despite Pearl's achievements, at over 80 years old, he's now one of the most ardent critics of this technology. Why such a drastic change in attitude? It all hinges on the concept of cause and effect. Pearl believes that contemporary artificial intelligence lacks genuine intelligence. It merely constitutes a vast database relying on pre-existing human input. Yet, true artificial intelligence must transcend experiences, envision unprecedented scenarios, and handle matters beyond the scope of the database. To possess this ability to surpass experiences, one must first possess causal reasoning. So, why does causal reasoning empower one to transcend experiences? For example, in the Bible, when God questioned Eve about eating the apple, he asked, "What have you done?" Eve's response was about cause and effect. The serpent deceived me into eating the apple. For humans, causal reasoning is a natural thought process. However, it reflects an ability to transcend experiences. Causality isn't just a summary of known experiences, such as feeling full after eating. It signifies a deeper cognitive ability beyond experience. You might think, why not translate this causal thinking into a code for AI? The problem lies in the non-existence of such a code. Over the past century, causality hasn't been part of the scientific domain, many scientists even argue its non-existence. Therefore, lacking a scientific language to describe it, how can scientists teach it to artificial intelligence? The core essence of this book is to reintroduce causality into the realm of science and explore how to view causality scientifically. What shape this science will ultimately take or if it becomes a new scientific field remains uncertain. Witnessing the birth of a new science would be a significant moment. Nonetheless, even if it doesn't emerge, we've engaged in a fascinating scientific discourse on causality. Before delving into the interpretation, I must highlight that this book contains an immense amount of information that's challenging to cover in half an hour. Additionally, certain parts surpass my expertise. Today's interpretation merely scratches the surface of causal science. If someday you come across this book, I hope this interpretation aids in your understanding. Next, I'll divide this into two parts to decode the book. Part 1, we'll explore a 100-year-long scientific speculation on causality, examining how we should scientifically perceive cause and effect relationships. Part 2, delving deeper into the wisdom of scientists, we'll discuss how to enhance our own causal thinking using their insights. Let's delve into the first part, how should we scientifically view causality? Over the past century, science has largely dismissed causality. Let's trace this back to the late 19th century. In 1877, Francis Galton, a renowned inventor, anthropologist, and a pioneer in statistics, conducted an experiment challenging causality in science. He set up a board called the Galton board, featuring a series of pegs above and slots below. A ball dropped from the center, bouncing off the pegs before landing in one of the slots below. Despite the ball's random path, a peculiar pattern emerged, a bell-shaped curve, a Gaussian distribution, forming in the slots below the board. Galton used this to simulate human genetics, where despite numerous factors, traits like height still conformed to a normal distribution. Galton's experiment continued with a second board placed beneath the first, simulating 2 generations of inheritance. Surprisingly, the distribution of balls in the second set of slots amplified the Gaussian trend. This implies that extreme values are more likely in the following generation, contrary to real-life observations. In reality, extreme traits do not become more prevalent with each generation as predicted. This paradox puzzled Galton for 12 years, concluding that there's no explanation, no mystical force behind this regression toward the mean. It simply happens without a discernible reason, defying causal understanding. This observation led to what Galton termed regression towards mediocrity, now commonly phrased as regression towards the mean. It suggests that regardless of how extreme a trait is in one generation, the next tends to approach the average. This phenomenon lacks a definite explanation. Pearson, Galton's student, later expanded on this, claiming the world operates only on correlations, rejecting causality. Many scientists supported this notion for a long time. Pearson distinguished correlations, suggesting some are meaningful, like the correlation between parent and child height, while others, like the chocolate consumption and Nobel laureates in a country, lack meaningful connections. However, Pearson's stance seems contradictory. While dismissing causality, he uses causal terms, like cause. He acknowledges certain correlations as meaningless due to the absence of causation, implying causality in his reasoning. Ultimately, even staunch opponents of causality like Pearson seem to inadvertently rely on causal relationships in their analysis. At this point, the debate around causality becomes somewhat awkward. Scientifically, we can't prove causality's existence, yet our thinking is inherently entwined with it. So, how should we scientifically approach causality? In this book, Pearl provides an answer from a slightly philosophical viewpoint. He suggests separating subjective and objective dimensions. According to him, causality is a subjective human mode of thinking. Although the objective world might operate on mere correlation without causality, our cognition relies on establishing causal connections. For instance, after eating one bun, you subjectively predict that eating more will lead to fullness, even if you haven't eaten the additional buns. This guess arises from establishing a causal link: eating buns causes satiety. Yet, this conclusion might feel insufficient. The book delves into causality but doesn't define it in scientific terms, only describing two features: a thinking capacity beyond experience and a subjectively established mode of thinking. The reality is current scientific research hasn't defined causality scientifically. However, the obsession over this question isn't sustainable, especially due to one factor: artificial intelligence. Dwelling on the existence or scientific definition of causality might elongate the process. Pearl aims to bypass theoretical debates, focusing on practically imparting causal thinking to computers. Pearl first identifies a flaw within the consensus on correlation, hinting that the assertion of non-existence of causality isn't entirely solid. Regardless of your stance on causality, no definitive reason contradicts it. Given the theoretical impasse, the focus shifts to practical implementation, teaching machines causal thinking. It's less about defining causality scientifically and more about refining our own causal thinking. Since causal thinking is subjective and we aim to impart it to machines, enhancing our own understanding becomes pivotal, akin to honing one's skills before becoming a teacher. This isn't solely a scientist's concern, it's pertinent to everyone. Let's delve into how to refine our own causal thinking. Pearl, as a scientist, offers numerous methods in this book. Among them, two methods prevail throughout. The first is called confounding factor distinction, and the second is known as identifying intermediary variables. Let's start with the first method, confounding factor distinction. What does this entail? It's rooted in a famous paradox known as Simpson's paradox. Imagine a drug that is harmful to both men and women but beneficial to humanity. Sounds contradictory, right? Bear with me, the following reasoning may confound you further. Let's look at solid data. Suppose an experiment divides patients into two groups, a treatment group with 40 women and 20 men and a control group consisting of 40 men and 20 women. In the control group, 40 men display a 30% disease rate, while 20 women exhibit a 5% disease rate. In the treatment group, 20 men show a 40% disease rate, and 40 women exhibit a 7.5% disease rate. Now, to the odd part, combining these groups, the untreated group has a 22% disease rate, and the treated group shows an 18% disease rate. Oddly, the drug seems beneficial overall. Simpson's paradox is not a new discovery and has sparked academic debates for decades. Pearl offers a new approach from a causal perspective, identifying confounding factors causing Simpson's paradox. These factors simultaneously affect both cause and outcome. In this experiment, taking medication is the cause, and disease occurrence is the outcome. What factor disrupts both aspects? It's gender. The different disease rates pre- and post-medication in males and females imply gender's influence on medication effects. Additionally, the gender ratio differs between control and treatment groups, indicating its correlation with medication. Therefore, gender is identified as the confounding factor or backdoor path, disrupting the causal chain. To tackle this, you must block this confounding factor, which means segregating factors related to the confounder, avoiding their direct aggregation. Separating calculations by gender neutralizes this confounding factor. Post-separation calculations yield a precise conclusion: the drug is harmful to both men and women and, consequently, humanity. This algorithm might initially seem complex, but upon contemplation, it unveils simplicity, akin to piercing through a layer of paper. Pearl himself divides causal thinking into multiple levels, but let's not dwell on all of them. The confounding factor distinction, as I mentioned earlier, stands as the highest level. Understanding this tier will illuminate Pearl's perspective on the highest level of causal reasoning. Yet, if this level seems complex, let's ease it a bit. The second, slightly simpler method is identifying intermediary variables. What does this entail? Simply put, it involves one cause leading to a second cause, and the second cause ultimately resulting in an outcome. For instance, during the age of maritime exploration centuries ago, sailors often suffered from scurvy, which could prove fatal. People speculated this could be linked to diet due to the lack of fresh vegetables and fruits at sea. In the 18th century, the Scottish Navy discovered that consuming lemons prevented scurvy. However, shifting from expensive Spanish lemons to cheaper West Indian lemons led to a widespread outbreak of scurvy despite the assumption that lemons were the cause. It wasn't until the early 20th century that people realized it was the vitamin C in lemons that prevented scurvy. The West Indian lemons contained only a quarter of the vitamin C found in Spanish lemons, and boiling lemon juice destroyed the little vitamin C that remained. In this story, vitamin C is the intermediary variable. Eating lemons led to the ingestion of vitamin C, and vitamin C intake prevented scurvy. In essence, identifying the intermediary variable is crucial in constructing a causal model. If your causal model cannot be repeatedly verified, consider whether you've overlooked an intermediary factor. These are the two methods discussed today to enhance causal thinking: distinguishing confounding factors and identifying intermediary variables. Both are advanced cognitive techniques within Pearl's hierarchy of causal thinking, understanding which remains incredibly beneficial. This concludes the second part on improving causal reasoning. We've discussed two methods: distinguishing confounding factors and identifying intermediary variables. Let me reiterate, this book, Why, is challenging yet profoundly insightful. If this topic captivates you and sparks a deep curiosity, I recommend reading the original book. Congratulations on completing this journey through Why. Thank you all for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with friends. Let's combine wisdom with action, achieve our financial goals, and create a better future together. Thank you, goodbye.